Recording.
Hi. Should we start now? That's okay. We can edit
Yeah.
it out. It's fine.
Yes,
Okay.
start.
All right, I'll start. So, this week we are going to be discussing chapter 5, which is changing relationships, stages, turning points, and dialectics. I'm Alexis,
I'm Michelle.
I'm Lauren.
and we are going to first start by discussing communication skills with Lauren.
Okay, so in order to tie all three of those points together, communication is one of the most important skills. So, with that, relationships don't just develop out of thin air. People must advance and nurture them. So, the way you build your communication skills is through building relationships and meeting new people and then taking it from there. So, I don't know how to pronounce this. Burmester, Furman, and Wittenberg and Rice identified 5 types of communication skills that help people build relationships with new friends and romantic partners. So, for this first one, it's relationship initiation. And this has to mainly deal with people who are already skilled in relationship initiation. They know how to approach people and make that first impression and make it good. They're mostly outgoing and they already have set predetermined ideas of what they're going to say. And they also feel comfortable introducing themselves and striking up that conversation with that new acquaintance. So the second one is going to be self-disclosure. And this is people who gradually increase the depth of their disclosure so it becomes more personal to them. So they make the conversation that they're conducting more personal to them to further it. And also, when they know how to self-disclose in appropriate ways, this allows them to get to know others without scaring them off. So in a way, they know a little bit of information, personal information about you, personal information about them, in order to approach the conversation more comfortably. So with emotional support, when you have effective emotional support, it also entails being like a warm and responsive person to others rather than just telling people to do. So your aura or like how you come off to people is way more as if you're like open to their emotional side. And then for the skills that are involved with the emotional aspects of this is you're obviously empathetic to people's concerns that they have. So if someone has a problem, you're understanding, you know how they feel. You can put yourself in their shoes, and you can also offer advice for them. So you also have negative assertion. Negative assertion is being able to say no, which is also a really hard skill, communication skill to have because a lot of people have trouble saying no to certain things. So with this, you can say no in a more constructive way rather than just being blunt and no one gets their feelings hurt. And then the fifth one would be conflict management skills. So this is how people are usually on their best behavior and they refrain from engaging in conflict. So they know when and when not to engage in conflict, and they know when conflict is about to happen. And then people who are really skilled in conflict management, they're able to listen better with their partner and they can understand their partner's perspective. So the next stage is going to be the relationship stages. And this is involving more intimacy, could be, or it could be the same thing as just having platonic friendship. So the first step is going to be initiating. This stage involves exchanging superficial information that allows strangers and new acquaintances to get to know each other a bit without making themselves really vulnerable. So you get to know someone, but sometimes it's not always on that personal level when you're first meeting somebody. The second one would be experimenting. So with this, if a relationship is to take it further than the initiation, then they move beyond the exchange of superficial information. When you're in your earlier stages of relationship, people are particularly able to look at one social media or look at their background history just so they can get that one layer of not knowing them well off their shoulders. With intensifying, people emerge from the experimenting stages and believing that there is potential for a close relationship. So once you get past those two, you think that this could be something more. You think that you could build a really close relationship with that person. So that's what that is. It's kind of like that knowledge and acknowledging that you want to be close to that person, and then integrating. And this is kind of when it gets romantic if it can lead to that with the relationship. So you've already been close with them and you're ready to show that closeness by presenting yourself as like kind of a couple out to the public. And the key here is that both people are on the same page with this identification. And the fifth one is going to be bonding. So it's kind of like you're officially together, but it's like spending that quality time together, spending that those intimate moments together. So basically, you find a way to declare their commitment publicly to each other and formalizing the relationship. You make future plans, promises, and all that other stuff that involves when you take a relationship further. Okay, so next, Michelle's going to talk about the coming apart stages.
So for the coming apart stages of things, the first stage is differentiating. And this occurs when people begin to behave as individuals rather than as a couple, and they emphasize their differences. So characteristics of this stage would include feeling lonely, confused, and inadequate. But it is important to note that the differentiating stage is on the coming apart side of the staircase, but it is also considered part of maintaining a relationship. So extended differentiation, though, can lead to couples feeling disconnected. So moving on to the next stage, which is circumscribing. This occurs when communication becomes constricted in both depth and breadth. And that's a quote from Guerrero et al. In the textbook. Characteristics of this stage include talking that tends to revolve around mundane things and everyday issues. Communicators also use talk and avoidance of talk to distance themselves from each other. And it's also important to note that a key characteristic of this stage is logistical talk, which is superficial talk that revolves around the logistics of things. And the textbook uses the examples of like who will pick up dinner, who's going to pay whatever bill they need to pay for. But when logistical talk does occur as a dominant form of communication, the partners begin to feel as if they have nothing deep to talk about. And even though the circumscribing stage doesn't necessarily mean that a relationship is in trouble, it only is if it is a dominant pattern in the relationship. All right, moving on to the next stage, which is stagnating. This occurs when the relationship seems to be at a standstill. So communication becomes tense, awkward, unproductive, unpleasant. There's a distinct contradiction. There's contradictory between emotions. So somebody can feel unwanted, but they'll also feel sentimental. And then they'll also feel bored all at different times of the relationship, which would be contradicting emotions. Couples also post each other less on social media as well. But when couples do reach this stage, there is a chance that they can revive their relationship, even though it's on the coming apart side of the model. Next, we are looking at the avoiding stage. And this stage is best defined in terms of physical separation. So characteristics include less frequent communication. There's statements such as, I don't know, or I don't care. People feel annoyed, nervous, and helpless in this stage. They even move into physical environments. But if that's not possible, because not everybody can just like leave at the drop of a hat when they have a lease signed for the next year, they will try not to encounter each other by separating themselves physically within that space, or they just won't communicate at all. They'll try to speak as less as they can to each other as humanly possible. The goal of the avoidance stage is to achieve as much physical and psychological distance as much as possible. Moving into the final stage, which is terminating. This occurs when relational partners end contact, often after discussing what went wrong and talking about the details of this breakup, courtesy to Guerrero et al. So characteristics of this stage include negotiation about what the post-breakup relationship is going to look like. It can be tense, awkward, and hesitant communication. Also during this stage, pruning occurs. And what pruning is when a partner in the previous relationship at this point, blocks the other so that they don't have to subject themselves to seeing them on social media, so that their feelings don't get hurt. They don't want to be exposed to them, so they just take it upon themselves to block them, to separate themselves from the situation. So, important to take away from the ordering and timing of these stages. People do not always move through these stages in an orderly manner. It's not linear. So the 10 stages basically just outline a typical pattern of relational development and decline for couples, but there are variations and relationships can follow different trajectories. So moving into the next topic, which is going to be turning points. We should probably define it first. So Guerrero et al. Define it as any event or occurrence that is associated with change in a relationship. So specifically, the turning point approach, which was created by Baxter, this emphasizes events that stand out in people's minds rather than mundane events, such as having the strongest impacts on their relationships. So the turning point approach basically is saying that things stick out, not just mundane things. So I'm going to show a link or show a video of specific turning points or specific examples of turning points.
We've been married for 51 years.
54 years.
We're celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this year. Friday the 13th turned out to be the luckiest day of my life.
I think what I love the most about Bruce is he's very kind.
She's a good cook. Serene.
She's a very compassionate person.
She is truly the person I always wanted to be.
I love it. She is the epitome of serenity.
Oh, one surprise to me about marriage after all these years has been what a joy it is at this stage.
I didn't know that it would be that wonderful again as it was, before we had all these little screaming Mimis.
Well, it's not easy.
Well, and the
And
biggest
if anybody thinks that you're going to be on your honeymoon for 51 years, it's ridiculous.
Sometimes the tunnel's pretty long.
Yeah, and dark.
Well, it has been an enjoyable challenge because I've been introduced into a culture that I was just totally ignorant of.
It was very hard for her, I know
Yeah.
that. What
But
hurt so much?
You. I think I had to have been like in my 30s or early 40s. I just thought, this is it? This isn't fun.
It didn't matter to me that Jim wasn't a member of the church because I loved him very much. And I thought if I only lived with him for this time only, then that was what I would be happy with. But a couple of years later, when our children started to come along, I realized that was not true, that I wanted to be with my children and him forever.
Really, the only reason it worked in those early years is we both loved the Lord, and we taught our children to love the Lord.
The secret to anything, I think, holding to the rod. If you hold to the rod and don't give up when things are hard, there's always a way through. President Hinckley always said it, that this will pass and that things will get better. And things always do get better.
So you have to be patient and loving and see where it goes.
Yeah.
You're going to have ups and downs, but it's worth it.
You cannot change someone to fit the mold you want them to be.
I just respect his space and he respect my space. Love him where he is.
Be sure to buy 2 tubes of toothpaste.
Well, I will say you are the love of my life. And I'm so grateful that we have stuck it out this long. And I see us together another gazillion or Google. Do you say Google now?
She's my babe.
And I love you. And I love the fact that I'm going to have you by my side forever.
I love him so much. Love being with him.
How could you not kiss?
Yeah.
All right. So I thought that was a good video to display turning points because the couples reflected on and discussed not mundane things. They reflected on things like their wedding, the day they had their first child, their first kiss, the first time they went on a date. They weren't discussing things like, oh, that one time we woke up and brushed our teeth together. They were talking about things that stood out to them. They weren't mundane points, they were turning points. So moving on from that, we are going to discuss the turning point analysis, which is a method of plotting turning points on a graph to see how various events are related to changes in a relationship. So the most common turning points that have been identified in the literature there's these 8. So I'm going to briefly discuss examples of each one because each point kind of it explains itself. It doesn't really need an in-depth explanation. So first point, communication-based turning points. Examples could include the first time you talk to somebody asks you out on a date, you engage in a deep conversation where you self-disclose information about yourself. Moving on to the next common turning point, activities and special occasions. Examples of this for romantic partners would be occasions such as meeting your partner's family for the first time or going on a vacation together. But for family members, a turning point could include vacations, holiday rituals, people's graduations, something of that nature. Next, we have events related to passion and romance. So this could be somebody's first kiss, the first time a couple exchanged the words, I love you, their first sexual encounter, anything of that nature. Next, we have events related to commitment and exclusivity. So this occurs when people they decide to date only each other and they make it exclusive. So they drop all their other options and they're specifically like, I want you, you want me, that's what it's going to be. They finalize it. Next, we have changes in families and social networks. And examples of this could be a new baby in the family, or a change in the household configuration, or a new step parent, or a new step parent and their kids. There's a change in the family. Next, we have proximity and distance, and this deals specifically with physical separation and reunion. So examples would be vacations, business trips, school breaks. If your significant other went away to college, you guys don't see each other for 3 months straight, and then they come home for Christmas break, you've reunited. Next, we have crisis and conflict. Examples of this could be, for conflict at least, a first big fight, attempts to de-escalate or withdraw from a relationship, or actual relationship breakups. But there are also examples for times of crisis, which could include a turning point such as illness, death, accident, things of that sort. Finally, we have perceptual changes. And out of all of them, this one is a bit trickier because people like to understand what went wrong and why, but with perceptual changes, the cause of shifts in a relationship aren't identifiable. So examples could include attitudes toward the partner changing, even though they can't exactly pinpoint why. So yeah, out of all of them, I would say perceptual changes is a bit tricky because there's not really an explanation. It's your perception that's changing. There isn't any tangible evidence of something happening. But yeah, that's everything for the most common turning points. I'm now going to hand it over to Michelle to discuss relational dialectics.
So I'm going to be talking about relational dialectics. And first, I'm going to start off with the relational dialectics theory, which according to the textbook is a perspective that indicates that people have opposing interpersonal needs that exist in dynamic tension, that these tensions are evident in discourse, and that the success of relationships depends on how we manage these tensions. So first, I'm going to talk about what a discourse is actually. It's a system of meaning. So an example would be like talking about an apple. What type of apple is it? Where'd you get it? Did you get it apple picking? Did you get it at the grocery store? Like, what is the meaning of that apple? Next, I'll be talking about the centrifugal struggle, which is the tension between commonly accepted and less commonly accepted discourses. Under the theory, I'm going to be talking about discursive struggle, which is the struggle between two competing discourses. Next, I'll be talking about dialectal oppositions, which are discourses that have seemingly opposing or contradictory meanings. Under this is the dialectical of integration, which refers to the tension between social integration and social division. And under that, there are 5 different dialectical oppositions. The first one that I'll be talking about is connection autonomy, which focuses on how people struggle between their need for closeness and their need for distance in their relationship. The second one is inclusion seclusion, which is expressed when dyads or couples communicate in ways that stress the importance of spending time with other people, but also spending time alone with each other. The third one is the dialectic of certainty, which reflects the tension between the forces of certainty, stability, and routine, and forces of surprise, change, and newness. The fourth one is predictability and novelty, which focuses on how people struggle between their needs for stability and change in their relationships. This happens when the dialectical of certainty plays out internally. And the fifth one is conventionality, uniqueness, which focuses on how people communicate in ways that show consistency or inconsistency. Sorry, I can't speak today. With the larger social group. This happens when the dialect of certainty plays out externally. Next, I'll be talking about the dialectic of expression, which reflects the interplay of discourses of openness, disclosure, and candor with the competing discourses of discretion, privacy, and secrecy, according to Baxter. There are two different dialectical expressions. The first one is openness, closedness, which is internal, and it focuses on how people struggle between their need to be open with relational partners while also wanting to keep some information to themselves. The second one is revelation concealment, and it's external, which involves the push and pull between wanting to reveal aspects of your relationship to others, but also wanting to keep parts of your relationship private. The last thing I'll be talking about is managing contradictions. The first way to manage a contradiction is selection, which involves talking about how the tension in a way that values one side of the dialectic over the other. Example, openness over closedness. The second one is neutralization. It involves avoiding full engagement of either side of the dialectic tension throughout moderation or disqualification. Moderation involves striving to reach a midpoint such that couples engage both sides of the dialect, but only to a certain extent. Disqualification involves being ambiguous so that neither side of the dialect is engaged. The third point is separation. Separation occurs when people's communication reflects that they favor one discourse over another at different times. And I have a video to show separation.
You know, if what I do is so lame, then why did you insist on coming with me this morning? How was it so I just wouldn't go with Mark?
No. I wanted to be with you. I don't know. I feel like lately, you're slipping away from me, with this new job and all these new people and got this whole other life going on. I know it's dumb, but I just hate that I'm not a part of it.
It's not dumb. But maybe it's okay that you're not a part of it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like I like that you're not involved in that part of my life.
That's a little clearer.
Honey, see, it doesn't mean that I don't love you, because I do. I love you. I love you so much. But my work, it's for me, I'm out there on my own and I'm doing it. And it's scary, but I love it because it's mine. But I mean, is that okay?
Sure.
Sorry. All right. Let me go back. Go ahead.
So in that video, Ross feels like separated from Rachel because he's not involved with her work life, but she says like it's okay, like it's her work life, he doesn't need to be involved, and tries to make him understand, and he still doesn't understand it. Under separation, there's two factors, and the first one I'm going to be talking about is topical segmentation, which emphasize different sides of the dialect depending on the topic or context. The next one is discursive mixtures, when two discourses are combined to create new meaning. And there are three different mixtures. The first one is a reframing, which involves talking about tensions so that they seem complementary rather than contradictory. The third mixture is hybrid, which is a type of discursive mixture where two discourses are put together to create something that is new but can still be separated out. And the last one is aesthetic moment, which refers to transformative moments that profoundly change the meanings associated with discourses by showing how those meanings combine in a new way. And those are our references, and these are the main points of chapter 5. So thank you, and we'll see you in the discussion.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, we're good. I'll stop sharing now. Okay. We can, if we have to,